Hey guys, Dan Labbe here. Welcome to a new edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, and we have got a packed show for you today. We start off Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock. They join me, and we're going to set up Ravens week. The Browns going to Baltimore, of course, on Sunday. We're going to set it all up for you, tell you what we're thinking, tell you what we're watching as we get into game week. Then Lance Reisland is going to join the show. He's going to break down what he saw on the film when the Browns lost to the Bengals on Sunday. Then we're going to talk a little draft. Lance is going to stick around, and Tim Bielik, our cleveland.com draft expert, is going to join the show. And we're going to just talk a little bit of college football, kind of get you up to speed on where some of the quarterbacks are, maybe a couple other prospects. So, like I said, a packed show. We're talking Ravens week, we're talking a film breakdown of the Bengals, and we're talking NFL draft. So stay tuned for all of that. Real quickly, let me tell you about two things. Football Insider, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. You'll get a newsletter every single day. It's written by one of our staff members. That includes Mary Kay, me, Ashley, Jimmy Watkins, Bielik, everybody, a bunch of people contribute to that. Make sure you get that, and you can become one of our texters. So we text you with news, thoughts, all sorts of stuff. I do a pregame Q&A. That's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. The other thing I want to tell you about, get subscribed to our YouTube, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Search that on YouTube. You'll find us. We go live on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock for our post-game pod. I put a lot of these podcasts up as videos if you want to watch the podcast as well as listen to them. So, and then we got a bunch of sports for CLE stuff up there. We do stand-ups every day, shorts. Get to our YouTube. Get subscribed. Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Search that on YouTube. Okay, I've gone on for like 2 minutes. You don't want to hear me talk anymore, although you are going to hear me talk on the other side. Here is our new edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock with you. A packed episode today to get you ready for Baltimore week. We're going to lead off with some of the things we're thinking about as this week gets going. We're going to talk a little college football with Lance Reisland and Tim Bielik. Lance is going to give us his film breakdown from Sunday's loss to the Bengals. Again, a packed show here on a Tuesday to get you into Baltimore week. But let's get right to it here. Setting up this game on Sunday in Baltimore, week 2. Both teams, of course, 0-1. Both teams 0-1 in very heartbreaking fashion. So, Mary Kay, as we enter the second week of the season, not quite desperation time, but getting there for both sides. What are you thinking about as we kick things off?
Well, I'm wondering really what the Browns are going to be facing when they go into Baltimore in terms of, are the Ravens, is it going to be like a hornet's nest where they go in there and they are just ready to tear somebody's head off? I sort of think that that's going to be the mood or the mindset. They are not going to want to let Joe Flacco, their former quarterback who took them to the playoffs 6 times in his tenure in Baltimore, 3 AFC championships games, 1 Super Bowl, and 1 Pete Rozelle Super Bowl MVP trophy. They're not going to want to let that guy beat them. Furthermore, they are celebrating 30 years of stealing the Cleveland Browns. And so I think they're going to be fired up about that. That's going to be a rallying cry for them as well. So I do think it's going to be a tough environment to play in. And I did talk to Joe Flacco about going back to Baltimore when I got a chance to interview him before the opener. And I have a story up on that today with a little bit of video. He's really excited about this. This is his first time playing in Baltimore since they unceremoniously traded him. They just cast him over the side of the ship and went with Lamar Jackson instead after that 2018 season, Lamar's rookie year. So this is a big emotional game for Joe, but he's also heading into Baltimore, his old stomping grounds, with a very young football team and a very new offense that really hasn't come together yet. So they have their work cut out for them this week.
Yeah, this is something that hasn't been talked about a ton yet to this point. I'm sure it's going to come up this week. I wonder if Kevin's going to do like a history lesson on the Cleveland Browns, because I actually have the roster pulled up now, sorted by age. There's only one guy on this roster, and it's Joe Flacco, who's even old enough to say he could remember the Browns leaving Cleveland. And there's only I'm looking, there's not even that many guys that were alive when they left Cleveland, let alone guys that were alive when they came back to Cleveland in 1999. For a lot of this roster, this is the version of the Cleveland Browns that has existed their whole lives. So I'm sure they're all going to get a little history lesson this week on Baltimore stealing the Browns. The Ravens are celebrating that moment with the Browns coming to town, which I'm sure was done with intent. Yeah, Kevin's probably given a history lesson this week, but Ashley, on top of that, it is like Mary Kay mentioned, Joe Flacco going back, and I've got to imagine on the other side, John Harbaugh's sitting in those meeting rooms, and he's saying to that defense, "We're not letting Joe Flacco, the guy that we moved on from, the guy that we chose, that we basically said we're replacing you. We're not letting that guy come into Baltimore and beat us."
Yeah, and like on top of it, they're coming off their own kind of devastating loss in Sunday night football, right? And, I was laughing thinking about the 30th anniversary celebration because I saw some tweets after that Sunday night game, like some fans making jokes to the effect of, you can steal the Cleveland Browns, but you'll never escape the weird and new ways to lose. Like, that's just part of being the Cleveland Browns. But yeah, I mean, I know like people are just, I think, incensed about this, Browns fans, as they are finding out about it. But kind of like you said, Dan, it's not really something that's been talked about in terms of this 30th anniversary thing. And this is the week to bring it all up. It's this and Joe's return. Like, those are the main things surrounding this game, the main storyline surrounding this game. And I think as more and more Browns fans hear about this, they are going to be absolutely enraged. And I do think, Kevin Stefanski is fairly good at finding unique ways to motivate this team. I think this is laid out on a silver platter for the Browns head coach to try to get this locker room fired up on top of their own heartbreaking loss from a week ago, on top of, I think I saw their double-digit underdogs for this game. That only happened even a couple of times last year. Like, there is a lot of motivation heading into Baltimore. If these guys can channel it, that could be a key.
I mean, again, going back to like the ages of these guys, I do wonder how much, like, I think Kevin, like you said, Kevin is good at sort of finding these little motivations, like most football coaches, but also I wonder how much he actually wants to harp on it, because there does come a point when it's like, yeah, okay, Kevin, I was 2 years old when this happened, or I wasn't even going to be born for like 6 years when this happened. So, I mean, he can play the like disrespect the city of Cleveland card and all of that, but also I do wonder. I'm curious how hard he'll go. Obviously, he's not going to tell us, and he's not going to put it out there for us to know. But I do wonder how hard he'll actually go with that part of it. But I do think Mary Kay, the Flacco angle. Yeah, hey guys, let's go get this game for Joe Flacco. This team gave up on Joe. They drafted his replacement, and pushed him out the door before that replacement's first season was even over. Like, let's go win this for Joe. I think that could be a pretty legitimate rallying cry.
I think so too. I think he would get more juice from them out of that than the Browns, left Cleveland and got stolen by the Ravens, because I think that's a Browns fan thing. But I do think it's going to be a hard sell to young players that if we walked up to 5 of the rookies tomorrow in the locker room and asked them about it, they'd probably be like, huh? They probably have no idea, right? Most of them probably have no idea. And it would probably be hard to whip up a little bit of anger over that. But Joe, they love Joe. They love Joe Flacco. And I think that they can get an emotional lift out of going back there and trying to support their quarterback and win this one for him. Even guys like, I'm sure Myles Garrett understands the magnitude of it, and Joel Bitonio and Denzel Ward and guys that have been around for a long time probably understand how much something like this would mean to Joe. So I do think that will be something. But as I mentioned before, I also think it's going to be hard for Joe to go in there with a veteran team on the road, that kind of noise, that kind of environment, with a very, very young supporting cast. And as you guys saw on Sunday, they don't even have their act together yet on their blocking schemes, right? Which is kind of surprising, but they don't. And we don't know yet if Quinshawn is going to be part of the mix. Haven't heard anything about that yet. Not really necessarily expecting to get any news today from the NFL about that. But they just aren't a cohesive unit yet. Now, Joe, just based on sheer talent alone, was able to go out there and throw for 290 yards against the Bengals. I don't know if it's going to happen that way again. But they need work this week. They need work. I think Joe and Jerry Jeudy, they need to be communicating the way that Amari and Joe used to communicate. Remember, Amari used to tell us all the time that those two guys would be texting back and forth all day long about different thoughts and ideas of things that they could do in the game and how they wanted to handle things. I think Jerry and Joe need to kind of get on the same page that way. I think Joe needs to find a comfort level with a couple of guys. I think he's going to need to be able to take some shots downfield. And yeah, it's going to be a huge opportunity for Joe to go in there and try to win this game.
I'll be honest, all of that said about Joe, I'm very worried about what's going to happen to Joe Flacco against this Ravens defense, especially if the Browns can't run the football.
Right.
I really think that Bengals defense is awful, like bad. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I think this Ravens defense is I think I called it varsity JV on the pod on Monday. Like, I think this is a whole different level. So they need to figure out that run game. Ashley, what are you thinking about this week as we get into Ravens week?
I'm still thinking about the Ravens losing on Sunday night. Now, it's on my list to go back this afternoon, and watch that game in full as Paulinka sits here and barks next to me. Just because there was a play in that game in the second half where Lamar Jackson was getting flushed out of the pocket. He ran back to like his own 10 or 15 yard line, and then somehow in the most Lamar Jackson fashion just keeps going and gets to like the 50 for a first down. And that, to me, plus everything Derrick Henry was able to do, like, it just sums up what the Browns are going to contend with. And it was this idea, kind of like what you're saying, Dan, where varsity versus JV in terms of the explosiveness and how each of these teams are trying to win. And we know for the Browns in this system to find success, like, a lot of it is the managing the clock. They do need to find a run game, but you want to be in control, I think, of the pace a little bit. The Ravens just want to go because they have Lamar Jackson and that's what he does. So I'm thinking about, number one, how they looked, and number two, just the fact that they lost. I mean, what a weird sort of way to lose a game. Buffalo had no timeouts left. They kind of had to run the fire drill there at the end and kind of have everyone jog out as the time was winding down. And there was some room for error, for things to go wrong there. But the Ravens had a big lead in that game. They blew it. It was their game to lose, and they did. So I'm thinking about not only what we saw and how fast they played, but the fact that it was their own heartbreaking loss, and now how are they going to respond from that?
Yeah, and I do want to clarify one thing. When I said varsity versus JV, I meant the Bengals defense going to the Ravens defense, not necessarily the Ravens versus the Browns. Now we'll see what we're saying Sunday after that game, but I was really comparing those two defenses. But something here, follow me on this, okay? So I did a little research. And last year, the Baltimore Ravens opened the season on primetime against the Kansas City Chiefs and lost a heartbreaking game to the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. That was the Isaiah Likely toe out of bounds game. They came back the next week in week 2 and hosted the abysmal Las Vegas Raiders. They were 9-point favorites. The Raiders were the longest odds to win that game, and the Raiders beat the Ravens. So, Mary Kay, in that any given Sunday world, maybe history will repeat itself. Maybe the Ravens will have a heartbreaking week 1 loss, and then once again, it's the biggest spread on the board. The Browns are the longest money line odds to actually just win the game outright, much like last year. With maybe the any given Sunday philosophy will show up on Sunday for the Browns.
Well, as I always say, takeaways are the great equalizer. So if this Browns defense can put its money where its mouth is and finally do what it says it wants to do this season and find ways to take the ball away, then maybe they can win the game. But they have to win the turnover battle in this game, I think. I think that's imperative. That's not going to be easy. I think they threw maybe 4 interceptions last year. I think I'd have to look that back up again. So they know how to protect the football. And that's something that the Browns definitely have to learn. But down in, down out, I do think that we are seeing something real in this Browns defense. I don't think we're seeing a mirage. I think that Myles Garrett, when he talks about wanting to set the tone for this team. And the way that I wrote it after the game, that he had that Superman hype video, and I think he went out there and he played like a superhero. I think that he is setting the tone for how he wants this defense, or how they all want this defense to play. And if they do that, then they just might give Lamar and company the business a little bit. I don't know. Maybe they'll hang 45 points on the Browns. It's hard to say. It's a game of matchups. We don't know yet how they're all going to match up and how it's all going to go. But I do think there's a world in which this Browns defense might actually have a little something for Lamar Jackson. Now they've got Carson Schlesinger in the middle. They have a strong middle and edge game now, and it makes it hard to get anywhere and find some of those lanes and whatnot. So I think they have some things on defense that might make it possible to stay in the game and not embarrass themselves. But I don't know. You never know how it's going to go. You just never know how it is going to go. And you don't know what these guys are going to do with Joe Flacco, but you know they're going to be trying to pick him off. That is one thing that we know for sure. They're going to try to menace Joe into mistakes and try to make sure that he does not look good. The receivers are going to have to win their one-on-one battles, and they're going to have to make those contested catches, and they're going to have to hang on. So hopefully for them, they learned some lessons in this past game. There were far too many drops. That back-to-back drop sequence by Harold Fannin and Jerry Jeudy, that was unacceptable too. So I think that the pass catchers, the receivers, whether you're a tight end or a receiver, they're going to have to step up in this ball game, and they're going to have to hang on to that ball. And then I don't know if the Browns are going to be able to run the ball. We'll have to see what happens with Quinshawn.
Yeah, and that's my concern. I mean, obviously the defense was awesome against Cincinnati. It was good all training camp. It was good. That's the thing you come out of that game with the most confidence in. But the offense, I mean, look, we saw it struggle throughout training camp for a multitude of reasons, right? The 4-man quarterback competition, all of that. We saw it have its ups and downs, and then it comes out against Cincinnati, and they hold the ball, they possess the ball, but they also struggled, and they turned it over 2 times, and it wasn't even turnovers that Cincinnati earned; it was deflected footballs. So, it's that part of it that worries me, and again, just kind of going back to this idea of Baltimore is not going to, unfortunately, the Bills were able to overcome that defense because they have Superman at quarterback. And the Browns just don't have that. They've got Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco can be really good. And sometimes he can turn the ball over a bunch. And you've got to hope that it's the former that shows up and not the latter against the Ravens, because they're going to get after him and they're going to pressure him, and they're going to try and they're going to sell out on that run game, I'm sure, regardless of whether Quinshawn Judkins is out there or not, and try to make Joe Flacco beat them. It's going to be interesting. But again, Ashley, just to think about this matchup, division games are weird.
They are weird.
They know Lamar Jackson as well as any other team in football because they play him twice a year. And Derrick Henry has generally not had huge games against the Browns. Now, he had one last year in the finale, but that one almost doesn't count. He had 20 for 138. Generally, even going back to Tennessee, it's not like he just dominated this team every time he played them. So they've had weird success against Derrick Henry.
They have. I mean, I remember looking that up even back to a couple years ago, like his last year in Tennessee, and kind of realizing that and then seeing that trend continue as he's now gone to Baltimore. But I mean, yeah, look, like this team shouldn't have beat the Ravens here last year. And they did. Like somehow 2 of their 3 wins last year were against 2 division teams in games that no one gave them a chance to win. So stranger things have happened in this rivalry. They do know Lamar well, but also, the flip side of that is I think about like the 2021 Week 12 game in Baltimore, which was that when Lamar threw, was it 4 interceptions? Am I remembering that wrong?
Yeah, that was the year when
they intercepted him 4 times.
And the Browns lost.
Yes, and they still lost. So you do see it both ways. Like I remember Myles Garrett was like so mad he could barely even talk at the end of that one. And you do just get some weirdness with these division rivalry games. I think it is always on the table.
So, Mary Kay, before we wrap up this segment, just a vibes check. Are you feeling good about the Browns going into this game? Are you nervous? I don't even know if nervous is the right word, but like what are the vibes that you feel going into this football game? I already said I'm scared about our old buddy Joe Flacco. I mean, he can handle it. He's a veteran. He's been in this league for a long time. I get a little nervous about I can just close my eyes and envision Kyle Hamilton taking one back to the house, like he did Deshaun Watson a few years ago. But what's the vibes check for you right now?
Well, one of the things that Joe is going to have to watch out for is the fact that they, in addition to trying to pick him off, they're going to be trying to get to him and force him to fumble. They're going to try to separate Joe from the football. And if you look back to last year, that happened a fair amount in Indianapolis. So if the pass blocking is pretty good in this game, then Joe should be okay. But if it doesn't hold up or if they find a weakness, then I think that's one area that they're going to try to exploit. So he's going to have to be really careful about that. They are going to be pinning their ears back and coming after him in a multitude of ways. Having said that, I think that this Browns defense, after this Browns team, after they watched the film on Monday, had to be feeling pretty good about themselves in some respects. They outgained the Bengals 327 yards to 141. After that game, Joe Burrow stood up at that mic and said, "We stole one." And the Browns know that the Bengals stole that football game from them. There's no way they should have lost that game. And just if everything else being equal, if the kicker makes his kicks, they probably still win that game. So I think offensively and defensively, they feel pretty decent about themselves. Pretty good on defense, fairly good on offense. And I think they would feel even better about themselves if they get Quinshawn back. And I think they can see that they bungled that game, that they botched that game. They made 4 crucial errors and even 6 if you want to include the back-to-back drop sequence by Jerry Jeudy, Harold Fannin and Jerry Jeudy on 3rd and 4th down there when they would have been in field goal range. So 6 glaring errors in that game. And I think that they know if they just clean it up and don't get rattled. But it's hard for a young team not to get rattled. It's very, very hard to stay composed when you have that many young guys on a football team. So they're going to have to grow up in a hurry to go into Baltimore and try to win this game. I actually think they can give Baltimore a decent football game. I think they can do it based on their defense. And I still think there's more that we haven't seen yet in the form of takeaways. So if they can get Lamar a little bit rattled and a little bit jumpy in this game, then I think they're going to have a chance. And if they stay composed themselves, they'll really have a chance. So that's kind of my vibes check, that I'm not thinking right now that it's going to be 50-10. I think they're going to go in there and I think they're going to give the Ravens a good battle. I think it'll be really hard to win, but I think they're going to give them a really long afternoon.
If it's 50-10, I don't. That would be real bad. Yeah, look, I don't think it'll be 50-10. I don't know. I haven't figured out. I mean, I know who I'm going to pick. I just haven't figured out if I think they're going to cover, if I think it's going to be close. I don't know. I haven't figured all of that out yet. But I do think what I want to see is a little bit of, and again, they might not show this to us outwardly, but I want to see a little bit of anger. I want to see a little bit of desperation. I want to see a little bit of I know we don't say must win on this pod, and it's not a must win, but I want to see them treat it like that, because if you lose this game, you're going to be playing a really good Packers team regardless of what happens Thursday night. That's a really good team, great defense, and they're going to be on 10 days rest coming to Cleveland. It just keeps getting harder and harder for this football team. So I want to see a little desperation and a little bit of no, it's not a must win, but let's treat it like a must win. Let's go out there and let's treat this like a playoff game, because the Ravens just played a playoff game, basically. I mean, that's what that felt like. And obviously, they get to live and play another 16 weeks and probably a lot more than that. But they're probably angry. They're pissed off. They also might be a little beat up physically, after that game. So go in there and be the more aggressive team, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, punch this team in the mouth a little bit. Match that physicality that they're going to bring.
Yeah, I think that's something we saw them do 2 years ago in Baltimore, and that's another game they won against Baltimore when I don't think anyone expected them to. Definitely the best Deshaun Watson performance that we saw, I think, out of Deshaun Watson still to this day here. And that game, I remember the prime example of what you're talking about, Dan, to me in that game was that Jerome Ford run where all those big offensive linemen just got behind him and they truly worked as a team to push him forward for the first down. We talked about that play quite a bit that year, and like those moments I just think end up being so meaningful in these division matchups. And like I said, especially just knowing where both teams are coming from after week one.
Yeah, and that was the game too with the said Tillman block on Kyle Van Noy
Yeah,
too.
that might be still the play of Sed's career to this day.
Yeah, maybe. Well, so maybe he'll make that. Maybe he'll make another play like that on Sunday, except it'll be a catch instead of a block. Who knows? So anyway, getting into Ravens week, any given Sunday, folks. The Ravens lost almost this exact game a year ago. So any given Sunday, we head to Baltimore to watch this football game. What we're going to do here on the podcast is we're going to take a break and come back. Lance Reisland watched the film. He's going to tell us what he saw on that. Then Tim Bielik is going to join us. We're going to talk a little college football. It's bad that I'm sitting here saying, like, any given Sunday, the Browns can win this game, and then we're going to do draft talk at the end of this pod. But whatever. What are you going to do? I'll let Mary Kay and Ashley go. We'll take a quick break and be back in a minute. Welcome back to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, and we welcome on, as we do every Tuesday after the game, Lance Reisland to break down the film from that Bengals loss on Sunday. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Dan. How are you tonight, buddy?
Doing well, and Lance is going to stick around a little longer, too. We're going to bring on Tim Bielik here at the end of the pod, and we did like 40 minutes of college football talk. So if you're into college football, if you want to hear about some of the quarterbacks in this draft, stick around for that after this segment. But Lance, let's get to it. Pretty devastating loss for the Browns. It feels to me like they followed the formula. They did the things the Cleveland Browns need to do. They didn't run the ball particularly well, but I thought they found ways to make up for that by passing the ball to Dylan Sampson in the short passing game. But they controlled the clock. They played great defense. They just made too many mistakes and they missed too many kicks. And that makes this loss frustrating because they followed the formula and it didn't work.
Well, yeah, like you said, they did a lot of things really good, but this is a product based. It kind of goes back to like the quarterbacks during camp, right? It's a product based. Do you complete the pass or not? They lost the game. So that's the first thing. Now for me, that's motivation, right? That tells me that you're never satisfied. And, everybody being angry, everybody having, their thoughts. I've received some, people upset with some of my takes on the game, but the bottom line is you lost. And you have to figure out a way to win. And right now they're figuring ways to lose. And I think that comes with go back to work, all that kind of stuff that I talk about as a coach. But that's really what it comes down to. You have to figure out ways to win. You did everything right, but you lost. And you got to figure out what, like, for example, there were some great things. Like, first of all, the amount of movement on offense was awesome, right? The bunch, the stacks, all the things they did was just awesome. And they had a great plan. Like you said, they didn't run the ball very well, but I thought they did a nice job with their swing passes and checkdowns and little screens and, kind of an extended run game. So there are things to build on. That defensive line is just like you and I, and we all talked about. They were dominant. That will carry over. They'll continue to be dominant because they have a lot of really good players there. They're going to have to figure out how to run the ball. They're going to have to figure out how to not let, don't lose. I guess my big takeaway is a game they should have won. Don't lose this game twice. And that would be your best bet. Get ready to go here, flush it and get ready for Baltimore because it's the NFL. And everybody, again, is going to tell them this week they have no chance. And everybody's going to say Baltimore is loaded. They put their pants on the same way. So you got to figure out where the weaknesses are and you got to go attack.
So let's dig into this a little bit. Let's start with the offensive side of the ball. And look, it was not super explosive. I know they had a few plays that were over 20 yards, but it was certainly a grind out there. And they were just very methodical. It was kind of like a million little paper cuts with the way they were trying to attack that Bengals defense. Do you think that was strategic, or was it just kind of what was there for them?
Well, twofold. I think that's their plan. I think a lot of it's their plan. But when you, in this type of scheme, when you don't have, if you're not successful with running the football, and I did a good job on first down, like you said, with little swing passes. Flacco played wonderful, but if you don't run the ball in this type of scheme, then it's hard to get the chunk plays. Your chunk plays don't come from, the Rams where they're spreading you out or things like that. Their chunk plays are going to come when you load the box, you're in 13 personnel or 12 personnel, you show a run set on first down, a run look. You've dictated with 12 personnel, they have less defensive backs in the game. Those safeties are kind of creeping up because they're getting dominated in the run game. And that was my big takeaway. That was my big disappointment, which I think will improve. They just didn't vertically move anybody off the football. And when you don't move people off the football, then you can play two high safeties, and you don't have enough talent to, necessarily go win everything, at the catch point, things like that. So their chunk plays are going to come with the ability to run the ball and then throw it on those rundowns occasionally, change of possession, balls over the 50, things like that, where you could take some shot plays on first down. But that all is, it is based on being able to run the ball in a physical manner where you have to get extra guys down in the box to stop it.
So why couldn't they run the ball? Why were they having so much trouble getting that going?
Well, I'm breaking down. So what ended up happening is I try to get every run down, and I'm on like my fifth or sixth type style run they run. So, for example, on their zone concepts, the first thing in all their concepts is there was no vertical displacement on their double teams. Their double teams, it's kind of like a receiver and a quarterback. It's like you have to build that timing, and the same thing happens on a double team. A double team, literally, your two guys are becoming one, and that takes a lot of, getting hip to hip and, making sure you're driving and galloping and who you got on the second level. So, offensive line comes down to two things. Do you know who you're supposed to block? And then can you physically move somebody against their will? And so once again, they're still learning the scheme. They didn't run it the year before. I understand, as I've been told a number of times, that, this is what they ran. They should get it. It still takes time, right? It still takes time. Live bullets. Working on those double teams. That was the first part. They just didn't move anybody vertically. And, going back to, I think Junkins will help, but this is about the offensive line and just getting more reps. And once they get more reps, they're going to be fine. And they have to go back with that mentality is that, people got to understand there's only a few Nick Chubbs in the world. And he was an elite guy, Hall of Famer if he doesn't get hurt. And when you have those type of guys, they make up for the extra guy in the box. But remember, if you bring extra blockers in, they're going to put more people in the box. Nick Chubb accounted for that extra guy. I don't know if Junkins, as good as he is, I don't know if he'll be that guy. But you can get it to 2nd and 6. And I think that's what the offensive line's got to do. But the struggle in the run game came down to the offensive line missed assignments on the second level, which I'm seeing a lot on film, which they'll get corrected. Different fronts. They're blocking wrong linebackers, in my opinion. And then physically moving guys against their will. And that just comes down to doing it in practice and believing in what you're doing and doing it over and over and over, almost ad nauseum till you get it.
So let's talk about the 2 picks and kind of what happened on those. I thought the first one, the first one was really bad luck. I mean, that was probably a ball that should have hit the ground. It was not a good throw. It was a ball that should have hit the ground. Jerry Jeudy was doing his job. He was trying to make a play. Would have been a spectacular catch. Instead, the ball pops up in the air and gets picked. I call that one bad luck. The Said Tillman one, I feel like that one was pretty much all on Said. Is it fair to say that, obviously Flacco gets those 2 picks on him, but really, unless you want to just, again, I didn't think the throw to Jeudy was that great, but it wasn't an interceptable pass until Jeudy tried to make the play. So does Flacco deserve any blame on those?
Well, obviously you want to always throw the ball to catchable positions. And I think those NFL guys, you and I have watched enough practice where, one of the things those NFL guys are trying to do, they're trying to hit spots. And my former coach in college, we always talked about every day trying to hit a left shoulder or a right shoulder or whatever it may be. So I think Flacco would be upset just that he didn't throw a more catchable ball. That being said, I think it's a little bit of, it's a little bit of Flacco not being tremendously accurate. Maybe those guys should come up with the ball. And then a lot of it's just bad luck. And that happens. And that's the game of football. Now, the game of football, if you're prepared and you've gotten yourself ready to go in the game, those things usually equal out at the end of the game, right? And that's really what it came down to. Good plays by the defense. And just kind of a fluky thing that if you're doing everything else right, it always balances out. But right now with the Browns, those things are magnified because there's such a fine line between winning and losing with this team.
So the defense, obviously, after that first drive, certainly lived up to what we expected. In the second half, they were great. I thought this was, going back and watching it, I thought this honestly was one of Myles Garrett's best games as a Cleveland Brown. He had the 2 sacks, but that fourth quarter, he took over that football game. There was everyone's seen the clip of him coming around on the loop and just drilling Joe Burrow. That resulted in a 3rd down incompletion. I thought Myles Garrett really impacted this football game in a way that only he can. What did you see out of this defense, but specifically out of that front?
Well, they're exactly what I thought they'd be. And even on that first drive, you got to give everybody the NFL. And there's a lot of teams that have success on that first drive, right? And then you start body punching. That's what this defense does. It body punches you with the depth. Now, this defensive line, Myles, first of all, the credit goes to Myles. Next level good. I thought he was even better this year in camp in terms of being even better, working on his craft, I guess you would say. But what he has is he has 3, 4, 5 other guys who can rush the passer and at times would demand a double team. Malik Collins demands the double team inside. If he gets against a guard who doesn't move, he demands a double team. And I'm giving you an example. There was a play where it wasn't a sack, but Miles came around the corner and tackled Joe Burrow. He stepped up in the pocket. Burrow ended up gaining like a half yard, but Miles caught him from behind, if you remember that play. And what happened on that play was, so they're walking the backers up.
Can I throw something? I do remember that play, and there's a really funny, if you watch it again, there's a really funny moment where Miles looks to the sideline, and you can tell he's looking for the sticks to see if he got a sack or if it was just a tackle for like a 1-yard gain.
Correct. Yeah. So this is why I think he gets so excited. So in that play, you see Samaje Perine move over to the left. Now, if Samaje Perine moves over to the left, the reason he does that is because it's a 4-man front, and he thinks he's going to be able to chip on Myles Garrett. Now, they're going to slide the center. They're going to slide the center left as well to help on Malik Collins. So they're going to chip on Miles with 2. They're going to move the center over. So they got the double team. In theory, they got the double team on Collins and Garrett. Then all of a sudden, they're going to leave Graham and they're going to leave Alex Wright or Isaiah McGuire one-on-one, which is the smart thing to do. That's what I would do as well. Even those guys can win. But what you're seeing from Schwartz even more this year is the ability, because the backers can drop so well, they're moving those linebackers into a mug position. So as they're doing that, all of a sudden Schlesinger walks up in that A gap right next to the center. Now they have to account for him. Well, how they account for him, because they fear Malik Collins, is that he takes Schlesinger, which now leaves Myles Garrett one-on-one with the tackle. And now that he wins, the other guy wins. Now they stop the blitzer. They double on, they get the double they want, but now they're leaving the Browns defensive ends one-on-one, and both of them won. So what you're getting a ton of 5- and 6-man fronts. Whether they bring 6 or not is irrelevant, because the offense has to prepare for it and assume that they're bringing 6, and then they're creating these one-on-one matchups for these guys that are just really tough to block. So that's what I mean by sustainability. That ability to create those one-on-one matchups is what Schwartz does very well, and you see it over and over in the game. As I'm watching the game, the ability to get guys one-on-one, but not only that, but the guys he wants to get a one-on-one on the particular play. So yeah, very impressive by Schwartz and by that defensive line, and the scheme fits for what these guys are trying to do.
Okay, so for those of you who are new to the program here, Lance comes armed with a question every single week, and I have to try and answer it. So, Lance, you sent me the question today, but I got to be honest with you, I haven't really put a lot of thought into it. So, I know you wanted me to be more prepared, but it just kind of... I read it, and I'm like, oh, I got to think about this, and then I had to, take my dog to the vet, and I've been running around, and, it's Tuesday, so it's sort of a little bit of an off day, so I didn't do very much thinking about this. But what's the question?
All right, question we'll start off the year with. I love this one. For me, it's who I would golf 4 rounds with, but I know you're not a huge golfer, so we're going to go with just a dinner, right? You get after the game, you go out to dinner, you get to pick 3 people to go out to dinner with, past or present, alive, dead, does not matter. 3 human beings that you would like to have dinner with from any time, any time. Just 3 people you'd like to have dinner with that you think would be just an amazing memory to have dinner with these 3 people, and why.
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and I'm like, I think I'm going to keep mine sports people. So I'm not going to dig into history. I'm not going to say Abraham Lincoln or something like that. I'm going to keep it to sports people. I'm going to keep it to sports greats. So I have to pick 4, right? Or am I picking 3 and I'm the 4th?
You're the 4th. Yep, you're the 4th.
Okay. All right. Michael Jordan. Let me see if I can pick one. Let me see if I can pick one legend from each of the big 3 sports here. So I'm going to go Michael Jordan. That's going to be 1. Let's see. Football wise, who do I want at that table? You know what? I'm going to take Jim Brown.
Ooh, solid. That's a solid one.
That'll be my football choice. And then now I got to pick the baseball guy. Give me yours. I'm going to try and think of a baseball option.
All right. Well, I got this is gonna be a good one for you. But my first one is my favorite football player of all time, and that's going to be Dan Marino. I want Dan Marino. I think Dan Marino is the best pure passer who's ever played the game of football. Not necessarily quarterback, and I know people are going to say, the GOATs. I'm just talking ability to throw a football from one person to another. I've never seen anybody do it. And I just kind of like how he went to Pitt and Miami. And I'd love to sit down and talk with him like that week they beat the 85 Bears. Like, what was his thought process like that week, like on Tuesday? Like, what did he think? Did he think, because if you remember the 85 Bears, like they were dismantling people with that 46 defense. Obviously, I'm going to go with my favorite player of all time. My second one is just because of the time and because of, my grandfather playing professional baseball. I'd like Jackie Robinson to be there. And the reason why is because that was a tough time for, how did he handle that situation, during that time? How did he handle, the racism and not being able to eat with the team and just kind of keep fighting through it and then play at the level he played at? That was pretty interesting to me. And then our third one is we have one in similar, and I think it's if you're a sports fan, you gotta invite Michael J. You gotta have Jordan with you, right? For me, I was thinking about some guys that some honorable mentions would be like the guy who worked. This is gonna be weird, but the guy who worked the gate at the Coliseum in Rome back when they used to fight, right? So the guy who opened the gate when the animals would run out or people would fight. Not any of the gladiators of the time, but just the guys who like the backstage guys, right? The guys who opened the gates or the guys who got people ready to fight. Just to hear about like the inner workings of the Coliseum in Rome, because for me that's the birthplace of sport. So like competition. So somebody in the Coliseum, I'm not quite sure who, but that would be my honorable mention. But those are my three. All right, who you got?
I mean, if we're being honest, if we're just looking for stories, you always pick like the security guys or the equipment guy, like the guys who are working behind the scenes but are around. They're around everything all the time. Like they see everything, and it's like they're sworn to silence. But yeah, if we're just talking about guys that can sit down and tell some stories, those are the guys you want, whether it's going back there or going to like the guys that were doing it at the Richfield Coliseum. Those guys have got some stories, I bet. So that's a good one.
I tell you what, if you want to know, like, for example, that's a great point. If you want to know how a high school football program works, talk to the athletic secretary. She's the one who really runs the program. So right. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off. Who's your last one?
So I got a weird one here.
Good. I like weird.
Just because I think it would be, it's not weird, but I think it would be fun. It doesn't. So we got Jordan, we got Jim Brown, and I wanted to pick a baseball one too. I'm going Babe Ruth.
Oh, you're going.
The guy.
That's a good one.
The guy he's a partier, eats good food. Probably has some stories to tell from 1922, what it was like to be the best baseball player on earth in 1922. I think I'm going to go with him. So I'd have that. This would be a crazy mix between him and between Babe Ruth and Michael Jordan. They would probably just spend the whole time gambling. But like, I got Jim Brown, I got Michael Jordan, and I got Babe Ruth. I think that'll be my list.
All right. I'm gonna give my family a little shout out here. My grandfather played for the Washington Senators and actually batted against Babe Ruth before he became a full-time batter. So that's a little. My grandfather was an outstanding athlete at Camp McKinley.
How'd he do?
He said Babe Ruth was good. My grandfather was really, really a good hitter, and he said Babe Ruth, was really good at everything he did. Said he was okay. He said he had, he batted, hit against him a number of times, and he said he had some hits. My grandfather was very, very modest in how he said he would do things. He always thought Babe Ruth was the best athlete. He didn't care about how he looked. He said Babe Ruth could do everything well. He's one of those guys, like he always would tell me, he's one of those guys, no matter what he did, he was good at it. So anyway, shout out to Gramps.
Well, I'll ask him if he remembers him at dinner.
That's right. You're right. Tell me how that dinner goes.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
You know who else? How about baseball? I'm thinking like John Kruk or Manny Ramirez would be great.
I get clips on Instagram. Yeah, I get Instagram clips sometimes of like Phillies games, and Kruk is on the broadcast, and he's just completely unhinged. So
yeah. So you're right though. If there'd be some guys behind the scenes that you're like, that's a guy you gotta know.
Give me any clubhouse. Give me the clubhouse manager for the Indians in the mid and late 90s. That's the guy. That's the guy who would have the stories.
Absolutely right. Or how about the 85 Bears equipment manager with the characters they had on that team? Could you? I mean, just absolutely nuts. Absolutely, yeah. So anyway, good start to the season. Good question to start the season. I like it.
Okay, Lance is going to stick around. We are going to take a break. When we come back, Tim Bielik will join us, and we're going to talk a whole bunch of college football. Like I said, it's about 40 minutes talking about a bunch of these college quarterbacks. Some of the top guys, some guys we like. We kind of dig into it coming up after this break. Welcome back to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Lance Reisland is still with us. Now we welcome on Tim Bielik. So you guys know what this means, our longtime listeners. What are we going to talk about? If Dan, Tim, and Lance are all together on the podcast, of course, we're going to talk a little college football, a little NFL draft. I guess a little more college football focused because I think that's, at least for me personally, that's kind of how I'm watching these guys sort of in that lens of the NFL draft, but also just watching them in the lens of, hey, college football's fun. So we'll talk about a number of quarterbacks are going to be pretty quarterback heavy here as we get caught up on the first 2 weeks. And of course, that first week was really the big one that stood out with a lot of these guys. So let's just kind of run through these guys in some semblance of an order here. And we'll start with Lance Reisland, your guy, the guy that you've been on since last year, Garrett Nussmeier. And I'm going to start by saying this. Thinking back to that Clemson game, a night game on the road, fake Death Valley. The way he played in that game, I was really impressed that we didn't see kind of the risky, we're going to talk about this with another quarterback on this pod. We didn't see the risk taker, Garrett Nussmeier. We saw a really polished pocket passer, a guy that at times kind of took what was there. That's a guy that looked like a pro in that football game.
So I will say this, it's funny you say risk takers. One of the coaching points I always try to tell our quarterbacks, because a quarterback you're in a meeting and a quarterback will say, should I take that chance? And I always tell them knowledge it allows you to take risks. And when you're knowledgeable of where you should be with the ball, usually there's an open guy. Now, it doesn't mean all the time, but usually there's an open guy if you go through your progressions, if you understand the coverage you see, if you're able to move in the pocket. Obviously, there's a lot of variables. But what he showed me was, first of all, I was even more impressed with his arm strength. I think he's improved his arm strength, his ability to kind of just whip it off multiple platforms. But he does a lot of things really well fundamentally, right? Fundamental, right? He's good in the pocket, he transfers his weight, all that kind of stuff. And once again, Dan, I think what you're saying, for me, that's his ability when you're not taking risks because you're going to the right places with the football. And when you go to the right places with the football, it sounds kind of, cliche, but you don't take any risks, right? Because you know where the holes are. Every defense has a hole. Doesn't mean you're always going to find them. Doesn't mean these guys aren't elite athletes. But for the most part, you saw a guy who's throwing a lot of college passes and he understands his offense, where his guys are going to be. He throws it on time. He throws it with great anticipation. Accuracy. So that's what I saw. So when you say didn't take any risks, that makes me smile as a quarterback coach, because that tells me he understands where he's going with the football, which I think is pretty evident with his experience at the college level.
So Tim, where were you on Nussmeier coming into this season? And look, we're 2 weeks in. We are hundreds of days away from the NFL draft. This process is just getting started. So where you have guys ranked now can change and things like that. But where are you with Nussmeier at this point? Where were you coming into this season, and has anything changed, I guess, after 2 games?
Sorry, I was actually muted. He was my number 2 guy behind Lenora Sellers. The margin wasn't that close because for me, and we'll talk about Lenoris a bunch, it's the idea of more polish versus a sky-high ceiling when it comes to Sellers versus Nussmeier. And, looking at that Clemson game in particular, I thought he had a great second half. The first half, you have your typical, week 1 struggles, because that time of the year, and everybody, that is the reality in college football. You don't have preseason games, so the offense is naturally going to be behind the defense, and I think that led to a lot of takes on the internet, people saying this quarterback class is suddenly terrible. I'm like, it's one game when these guys haven't had live action since December by and large. And there's other quarterbacks we'll get to that kind of fall in that category, but the way Garrett Nussmeier played in that second half was outstanding. Like Lance was talking about, understanding where to go with the football and playing smart football, not turning the ball over and making very good decisions. And that's a Clemson defense. We talked about it before. Peter Woods, TJ Parker, for top 10 guys. I would not be shocked those guys go in the top 10. Avion Terrell, he's another first round guy. So that's 3 first round picks on defense, not to mention Clemson has a great defensive coordinator in Tom Allen, who's been a great coordinator in so many places. And Garrett Nussmeier, the way he settled in that game, I really loved, his accuracy. He had some great NFL type throws. Lance was talking about the arm strength with Nussmeier. I thought, that was pretty evident. That was one question I had is, maybe not as physically gifted as Lenora Sellers, but I think for me to be a team that's going to take him number 1, I need just a little more, physical tools. I mean, he has it upstairs. There's no question about it. I mean, he's the son of an NFL offensive coordinator and Doug Nussmeier, a guy who, was a coordinator for years under Nick Saban in Alabama as well. So, he's been schooled properly as far as what he's supposed to look for with his, and also with his mechanics, the fact that the ball pops out of his hands so effortlessly. You saw those things in that game in Death Valley, in Clemson's Death Valley, I should say. And, I think for me after that game, and, I still have there's still a lot for me. I love on Laura Sellers. That gap has gotten even smaller to the point where I think I'm ready to call it a 1A, 1B with those 2 guys.
It's an interesting discussion, and it harkens back to when we get to Lenoris. I'm going to bring up a name. We were kind of texting about this a couple weeks ago. There's a little bit of a feel of, if you go back to 2018 when you had a draft with Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen. There were more polished guys in that draft. Josh Rosen was in that draft. There were polished guys. There were ceiling guys. There were, competitive, fiery guys who played football at Oklahoma. We'll get to that. We'll get to one of those again this year. It's interesting. I don't know if this class is going to pan out like that one did. Of course, Lamar Jackson was in that class too. But it is sort of interesting when you look at some of those comps to that class and then some of the guys that might end up being available in this class as well. So Lance, the thing about that Clemson game is his best throw of the night didn't count, like an egregious overturn. But as we kind of look at these check marks now, so he's got Florida this week. He's got Ole Miss in a few weeks, South Carolina on October 11th, Alabama November 8th. They play Oklahoma November 29th. We're going to get, first of all, some interesting kind of comparisons with other guys we're going to talk about here. But as we get into this SEC schedule a little bit, we're going to get to see Nussmeier continue to get tested here.
Well, yeah, and you're going to see a bunch of different coverages, a bunch of different fronts. You're going to see, obviously they know what they have to do. When you play LSU, you got to get them off his spot. So obviously the defensive game plan, not only are these tough teams, but he's the guy, right? And when you go into a week where you're the guy who's being stopped, that means they're going to throw a bunch of different things at you. I think, one thing, like all quarterbacks, but something that I thought the Browns had to do to Joe Burrow is you get him off his spot. And if you get quarterbacks off their spot, that's the initial thing that can cause a quarterback to struggle. If you think about like Joe Flacco struggles when that initial thing that he has to reset and things like that. So those are learned traits. And I think that's what these SEC teams will try to do to him is create that A and B gap pressure and try to get him off his spot, try to get him off that initial read. If you can get him off that initial read, not only him, but all quarterbacks can struggle with that. And that's why the quarterback position, you guys know more than me, and we're all wrong on quarterbacks, right? Because when you said Josh Rosen, I laughed because I was high on him, and I got to admit, you guys give me credit for things I do right, but I was high on Josh Rosen because I loved his ability to process, and I was wrong on Lamar Jackson. I mean, I thought he was going to be good, but not what he is. So it just comes down to that it factor, the production versus the ceiling and all that kind of stuff. It's a really, really hard position. I just think Nuss has the it factor. And obviously, we're going to find out really quick in the SEC.
So, Tim, let's move on to let's talk about Lenora Sellers, your other 1A, 1B guy. So this is the upside guy, right? This is the guy that you look at, and he's a raw prospect, and it's going to take some work. And that's why, so I know you've made the Cam Newton comp, and I'll let you talk about that a little. I actually compared him to Josh Allen. And the reason I went that direction, now he's a little shorter than Josh. I think he's 6'3". Josh Allen was 6'5", but they're about the same weight. But the reason I went that direction is because to me, if you're going to draft Lenora Sellers, and by the way, he's really young, and we don't even know if he's going to come out this year. We can say that for a few of these guys we're going to talk about. But you almost have to take the Josh Allen approach with him. And what I mean by that is those first couple years with Josh were pretty rough in Buffalo. If we went back in time to 2018, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that were laughing at the Bills for having him instead of Baker Mayfield, right? Like the Browns were right for that pick in 2018. Now Nobody would make that argument, right? Josh Allen is an MVP. He might win his second straight MVP. So the reason I make the Josh Allen comp is I see a raw prospect, a guy that sometimes misses some gimmies, a guy that is a really powerful runner. He's going to run you over. And also, if you draft him, you've got to be a little patient. You've got to live with some growing pains, I think, if he comes out this year. Now, maybe he goes back for another year, and you see that development. And the other point I'll make too is I don't think he has the weapons these other quarterbacks have. And Josh Allen, his last year at Wyoming, didn't have a lot of great weapons. So that's why I went that direction. I think Cam Newton's an interesting comp too, and I know that's you. That's the guy that you comped him to.
Yeah, I think for me, with the Cam Newton comparable is, strictly physical. I mean, Cam Newton was just a different dude. I remember from the, I think it was the 30 for 30 documentary about the Auburn-Alabama rivalry against Charles Barkley, when he was talking about Cam Newton basically said he was Charles Barkley's size with Bo Jackson's running ability. And I think you could see some of that build with Lenora Sellers. I mean, again, you look at him, he's 240 pounds. Like, he is... I 100%. I'm also on board with the Josh Allen comparison. You can make both of those, certainly. So with Lenora Sellers, what I wanted to see was, can he take a step forward as a passer? And I think the answer we've gotten in the first two games was a maybe question mark. And I think it goes back to Dan's point as well, that really he doesn't have a whole lot to work with. He doesn't have, what Garrett Nussmeier has. He doesn't have that elite running back he could just give the ball to in Caden Durham. He doesn't have a receiver, as polished as Aaron Anderson. I know he has Nick Harbor, and Harbor made some good plays. They connected late for a touchdown. There was another one where I thought it was his best throw of the game, where he didn't come down within the end zone, but I thought Sellers put the ball right where he needed to.
Another really bad overturn, by the way, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, come on, I'm in the camp of, if the play's incredible, give them a little leeway. Let's see something incredible. Maybe that's just, I get you gotta follow the rules, but once in a while if something incredible happens, just give it to them. Aside from that, Lenora Sellers in that game certainly had his ups and downs. I thought, Virginia Tech defensively settled in. I really did not like that safety he gave up. He kind of ran straight into the safety as opposed to kind of rolling out to his right. But, I just want to see continued progression with Lenora Sellers. I don't know if South Carolina is going to be in a position where they need to have him throw 30, 40 times a game. I don't think that's necessarily the way they want to play. But, I just want to continue to see strides with Sellers. And it seems like he's a guy who just continues to progress little by little every day. And when you look at that ability he has, I mean, the arm strength is effortless. His ability to run through people is very Josh Allen-esque. And some Cam Newton there, I don't know if he's going to be as special a runner as both those guys, because those are two of the most special runners we've seen from the quarterback position in the NFL. If he could be in that area, that just adds extra to what you can get out of Lenora Sellers. There's so much to physically love, but Dan, to your point again, he might need a little work. He might need a little time, just kind of behind the scenes, just continue to refine his mechanics, his footwork. The things I think you could see, any quarterback needs. Any quarterback going to college pros, you just want to have that extra refinement to make sure that, everything is down, all the good fundamentals are there. Any quarterback, I think, is going to need those things, but what Lenora Sellers has, from a physical standpoint, is the things you can't teach.
And some of it, too, is he's got to go to the right place. And I think this is where we put out that disclaimer that, yes, we made a Cam Newton comp. We made a Josh Allen comp. I'm not saying that 7 years from now, Lenora Sellers is going to be in the discussion for the best quarterback in the NFL and maybe on the verge of winning his second MVP. We're talking play style here. So just before anyone jumps to any conclusions, when we make these comps, we're talking about styles, we're talking about development plans, things like that. Josh Allen goes to Buffalo. They were patient. I mean, Sunday night, they showed that clip of his throwing motion in Wyoming and what it looks like now. What happened with Josh Allen is special. It is, and maybe unique. It's hard to do that. You don't see that sort of change very often. But you do see it, Lance, because the physical tools are there. And if you have physical tools, if you have physical tools and you're coachable, things can get cleaned up, things can get corrected, and then that ceiling is just sky high.
Well, sorry to cut you off there. Yeah, well, first I'm going to give our colleague Mary Kay some credit, because I remember before I started working with you guys, Mary Kay was really high on Josh Allen. So I'm going to shout her out, because I was not like she was. So good for her. The thing about Sellers that I really like is, like you said, the ceiling. And, it's one of those things. Do you take a chance on a guy with probably a higher ceiling than a guy like Nussmeier? Or do you take, when you're talking about, Tim was saying, the refinement? Well, Nussmeier has that more than any college quarterback I've seen in a while, obviously because his dad's an NFL guy and he's been doing this stuff for a long time. So and his ceiling's high too, but that Sellers ceiling, that goes into the Cam Newton. When you start talking about Cam Newton and Josh Allen, I'm not sure if Nussmeier will get there. He could, but it'd be obviously a different style quarterback. But there's guys that are really, really special. But yeah, like Josh Allen has elite arm talent and wasn't using it at Wyoming, right? So, the thing that I would say about Sellers which he'll improve on, I've been looking at what quarterbacks in college get to their second, third progressions. And not a lot of time, it has nothing to do with them. Usually it has to do with the offense they're in, right? The quick screens, the RPOs, it's what they're in. And you guys made a great point of, like, in context, right? Where they're at, what the coordinators are, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of South Carolina stuff is one read kind of stuff, right? Kind of, over the top, bubble screens, things like that. Now, most colleges are like that now, right? They're taking advantage of numbers games. Everything is no huddle. There is all one word stuff. It's all super fast, etc. So that's that's the learning curve for me. I think when you're as gifted as he is physically, I think he'll pick everything up. That'll be the thing, right? Getting to the second progression. And I say this without hesitation. That's what happened to Shedeur Sanders in his second game. He played fine. The problem is that they took away his first read. And when you take away your first read, then you learn to get to your second, third reads. And that's something Sellers will work on. All those guys will work on. I think Nussmeier has an advantage there just because of his father, but super talented guy. And you don't want to miss, you go back, you don't want to, as a GM, I could see why people are so intrigued by him because his physical gifts are second to none.
All right. So, Tim, I opened my email today, and there's a college football newsletter I'm subscribed to. And the subject was, "What's wrong with Clemson?" So here we go. It's time. Look, coming into this season, I know you really liked Cade Klubnik. I think he was your top guy. Sounds like that's changed here after these first two games. I think there's a lot going on there. I think, obviously he's got one receiver who's hurt. He's got, another guy that I really liked last year, Bryant Wesco. I don't think has been very good this year. So there's some things letting him down. It's not just him, but what is going on with Cade Klubnik right now?
It's struggling right now, and we joked that I was asking who the guy from that show Mad Money was. Jim Cramer, kind of a sell right now, like a soft sell on Cade Klubnik. I'm not ready to give up on him by any stretch of the imagination, but he hasn't been good. Just hate to kind of say it, but outdueled by Garrett Nussmeier in that first game against LSU. Looking at his numbers, completed 50% of his passes, 230 yards, a college quarterback rating of 95.6, which is not good. Had an interception. And then I was just for kind of clarity purposes, I was at Oktoberfest on Saturday in Berea. So anybody that listens to the podcast thought they saw me, you might have. So I remember I was checking my phone and I saw that Clemson was losing at halftime to Troy. And I think I can't remember if I texted you guys or whatever, because that I was starting to have some real concerns about Cade Klubnik and Clemson. They did turn around the second half. They obviously pulled away with a nice win. Klubnik did get a touchdown pass into Wesco, a couple touchdown passes to Wesco. So maybe it's a case of settling into the season. Like I said before, you don't want to always take too much out of the beginning of the season because you never know how guys are going to react to opponents now having a full year of extra year film to scout and adjust, and then you have to adjust back. And that's always the tug of war, I think, with quarterbacks. But with Cade Klubnik, the other thing that stands out to me, and I talked about this when I mentioned when I was on last time why I had him number 3. What turned him around for me was his ability to run the football. And through 2 games, he has -3 yards rushing. His longest run is 7. So I don't know if that's a thing where teams are taking the run away from him or he's just not running the way he's capable of running. But he's a guy who really needs to establish at least a little bit of threat of his runner to really maximize what he's capable of. That's where he really took off. Like I said, last season after the Georgia game was him starting to use his legs more. That really hasn't happened to this point. Still a lot of football left to be played. He can certainly turn things around, but for me, he's starting to really slide.
I know Dabo has had sort of an on-again, off-again relationship with the portal and how he builds his teams, but to me, if you're the Clemson Tigers, you got to have a better running back than a guy that used to be a wide receiver. Like you got to do better than that if you're Clemson. Like you've got to get somebody. But so that's part of the equation, right? Like the pieces around him have to help him. But also Lance, I don't know. I mean, what were your thoughts on Klubnik coming in, and what are they now? Did you like? He's a really divisive guy. Some people love him. Some people can't stand him. So where are you on?
Well, I had him in the middle of the pack for me, obviously in the top 10. But there's a couple of things that, for me, I've seen this year. And it's like the Nussmeier. That's why I was excited about Nussmeier even more than when I went into the season. There's a difference between being a part of the team and when you're a defensive coordinator and being the guy you have to stop. And when Tim was talking about his run game, they're taking away his run game. They're taking away his first read. And what they're doing is they're saying, I want you to beat us from the pocket after your second progression. Very similar to Lenore Sellers, obviously a different type of level. We're not talking skill set. We're just talking about what teams try to do. And Tim, you brought up a good point. When you have a year of film, you have to find weaknesses in really good quarterbacks like Klubnik. And I think what teams are saying is that let's not let him get started. If you remember last year, for me, Klubnik's a guy, once he gets into the game, he seems like he's a gamer and he's pretty tough, right? So he gets hit a little bit. He gets the running game going. They get a big play, things like that. So for me, it's the idea of he is now the guy. And when you're the guy, they're going to take things away from you. And they're taking away his run game. They're taking away his first read. I don't know. Obviously, some of his skill guys haven't played to the level that they're supposed to. Fundamentally, he looks okay. I think he's pressing a little bit. And when you press, obviously, you never play as well. It's like when you think you don't move as well as a running back. So I think he's pressing. He understands where he's at, what people think of him. I think you're right, Dan, in terms of this decisiveness. People like him or they don't like him. I think, I've always been kind of, I want to say lukewarm to kind of warm on him. I think he's got a ton of skill. He has trouble, that big game in the big setting. That's the it factor, right? And I think Klubnik's a guy, would not be shocked if he was outstanding, would not be shocked if he's a bust, right? And that's where I'm at with him right now. I'm not quite sure on him yet, but that's what I see. When teams go in, when LSU went in, they were stopping Klubnik. That was what they worked on all week. And that's the difference between being good. You being good when people don't know you're good, and then being the guy when everybody's trying to, it's like being Miles, right? Everybody's trying to block Miles, still being Miles. And that's kind of where Klubnik's at. He's got to take the next step of being the guy who everybody's trying to stop, and they still can't do it.
Well, the beauty of the ACC for Klubnik is he's going to get to put up some numbers here coming up. I mean, the schedule is not insanely difficult for him and Clemson. Obviously, that loss to LSU put him a little behind the eight ball, but he's going to have a chance to turn this thing around pretty quickly. And then, we might not really be able to make a real judgment on him until – if they make the playoff, until we get to that level. So that, again, problem with some of these ACC guys. Okay, so let's kind of lightning round a few more of these names. Tim, who's a quarterback that you want to talk?
Do you mind if I steal your guy, Lance?
Oh, go ahead, absolutely.
I gotta give Lance his props for John Mateer, because I think there's a lot of buzz for him right now. I did catch, most of the end of the first half, second half, Michigan, Oklahoma. Really liked what I saw from Mateer. That Michigan defense is a good defense to go up against. Wink Martindale's obviously a former NFL defensive coordinator, so Mateer is going to see some complex stuff that maybe he didn't quite see at Washington State. And I thought he really handled himself very well. I looking at the numbers from what he was able to do: 21 of 34, 270, a touchdown, and interception, and then running 19 times for 74 yards on a touchdown. He looked like he was in pretty good control in that game. I think someone brought the idea that he maybe is a more athletic Baker Mayfield, and I 100% see that. Somewhere between the Baker and Johnny comparisons, I think for me is Mateer. I'm not sure what kind of personality he is. I mean, those guys had personalities. I'm not sure what kind of personality Mateer is, but from a pure play style perspective, you can understand why there's a little bit of more athletic Baker in John Mateer. Kind of fitting that he's playing in Oklahoma, but he's really done a great job. And this was a good early test for him. Like I said, Michigan's got a very good defense, and they, still learning kind of his new teammates and, new head coach, obviously, and Brent Venables coming over for, coming to, as Mateer came from Washington State to Oklahoma. That's a pretty good statement win for Mateer, and it feels like he's, trending upward. So it's kind of good to see from, obviously another one of Lance's guys getting it done early on in the season.
Competitive guy, but something we talked about with Nuss last year, Lance. I mean, he's going to take some risks. And I was actually listening to a podcast that was talking about him this week. I think it was the McShay podcast. And the point that was being made was if you have John Mateer, you have to kind of tame him, but also you don't want to take that away from him. It's a really delicate line to walk with a guy like that.
Well, and it's funny when we talk about Mateer. But back when we did the podcast, and I picked Mateer as my number 2, it was the kind of the it factor, right? Kind of the some of his tools, mechanics, all that kind of stuff. But there's an it factor, and I really like the comparison to kind of the mix between the lines of Johnny Manziel and Baker. That ability to throw, he's kind of got a little mox to him. He kind of looks irritated when he's playing, and that he's not a system guy, right? And if you think about more of like the Kansas City offense, where you're able to do different things and improvise things like that, I'm not sure how great of a fit he would be in a Stefanski system. I look forward to watching him play the rest of the year because Stefanski works better with guys who are within the system. That's why I like Dylan Gabriel so much, and I'm still high on him within the system. So Mateer has showed me a lot. I love his toughness. To be honest with you, Arbuckle is my new favorite guy in the whole world. I can't wait to break down everything he's done. I got my buddies have all sent me. I probably got 30 games in the last 48 hours on Arbuckle. I love his what he does offensively. He's every time you think you know a lot in football, there comes a guy like that, and you go, oh, okay, I didn't know that. That's really cool stuff. So he does really great with space, and obviously some college-based stuff. But that college stuff is getting more NFL now, it's a lot different than it was 15, even 20 years ago. So Mateer is everything I thought he was. He's got a little mox to him. It's not about his mechanics. It's not about arm talent. It's not about any of that. He does all that fine. For him, it's about making plays and the it factor. And if he goes anywhere on my list, it would be above Nuss. It wouldn't be any lower. I love his skill set, and I don't know if he'll test great, and I don't care about any of that stuff. He's going to be a player in the NFL for whatever team gets him if he gets in a good system.
And so give me, since Tim stole your guy, give me somebody else.
Well, I'm going to go off the trail. I'm going to go with simply a guy who's just an outstanding guy to watch, and I'm not sure yet how that's going to carry over to the NFL. It's Haynes King from Georgia Tech. Just a tough dude. I want to see him throw more from the pocket.
I got a Haynes King take. I'm glad you brought him up.
So I like him a lot. Once again, it kind of goes back to there is a place, and I think we do a good job of like covering Tim with like what he could be and the production and all that kind of balance you got to get is why it's so hard to predict quarterbacks. But Haynes King is a guy, he's a football player. And what I mean by that, he's going to do whatever it takes to win the game. Run it, throw it. Now, is he going to be great from the pocket? I don't know yet. You haven't seen a ton of it. I don't know if you'll see a ton of it at Georgia Tech. He'll be one of those guys that could shoot up the boards at the Senior Bowl or one of those type of things. But I just really like him. There's nothing about his physical tools that people would tell me there's some things he struggles with. But as a football player and as a guy who's been in football, he's a guy that I like, my late father would like, because he's just a guy making plays, right? He's going to get a first down for you. He's going to make a throw when necessary. He doesn't throw great from the pocket, but he'll hit a dig if it's necessary, kind of things. Just loved watching him play. I thought he did a great, he's a very fun football player for me to watch.
So my Haynes King thought is somebody out there needs to draft him on day 3 and just make him their Taysom Hill. Bring him in and be your Taysom Hill. A guy you can bring in he can run it, he can throw it, he can do a bunch of different things. I don't look at him and see like, oh, this guy's a franchise quarterback in the NFL. This guy's a starting quarterback in the NFL. I love the idea of drafting a backup quarterback who can also be a weapon. We sort of had this discussion with Jalen Milroe, right? If nothing else, if he's your backup quarterback, he's a weapon. And I think Haynes King could maybe be that type of guy, Tim.
Yeah, no question about it. I was just looking at his numbers, from that game in Colorado, 13 at 21, 43 and an interception. Doesn't stand out on paper, but then you look at 19 carries, 156 yards. Like, he was great in that game, especially.
He was getting anything he wanted on that Colorado defense.
Yeah, the game-winning drive at the end, like, that was outstanding. Did that to Florida State a year ago. Now he does it to Colorado. Like Lance was talking about with it factors, you can see something there with Haynes King, and maybe why he doesn't throw a lot. Maybe that's just Brent Key's system at Georgia Tech. The guy is obviously famously loves to run the football. That's the famous quote that spread after that win against Florida State last year. And why not? When you have a guy like Haynes King, who's as good a runner as he is, why not embrace that? And certainly you want to see him. We as evaluating quarterbacks in the draft want to see him throw more. That just might not happen. So you kind of have to just go off the few opportunities opportunities that you do see and really go from there. They play Clemson pretty soon, so if he's available for that game, that would be a nice barometer. And Lance, you're talking about obviously taking things away from guys. If they force Haynes King to be one-dimensional, that Clemson defense, how's he going to do? That's going to be a fascinating barometer to see if he really is a guy you can shoot up draft boards as, a guy who can be a much better pro thrower than he was in college, or if Dan, to your point, he could be a Taysom Hill type. And to me, either one would be work for him, because I think he's going to have a role in the NFL. I think he's just got a lot of natural talent that he's going to find a place.
Okay, the guy I want to talk about is Carson Beck. Not really.
How about that? That text got answered quick, didn't it?
Listen, I texted these guys. We were watching the games week 1, and I texted them before the Miami game. Like, there's still one guy left, and I sent him a picture of Carson Beck, and it did not get a great response. But I'm just going to tell you guys, somebody in the NFL is going to fall in love with Carson Beck. He's big, he can move, he's going to put up numbers in the ACC. Like, a year ago at this time, we were talking about him as a potential top pick. So somebody in the NFL is going to fall in love with this guy after he spends this year at Miami. But we're not going to talk about him right now. I actually want to talk about, Lance, I texted you about this game on Saturday. I want to talk about two guys because I'm trying to figure out who might be some guys who we're not talking about, who aren't the top guys that rise up the draft boards once everybody really starts digging in, after the season and we get into draft season. And so I'm watching this Illinois-Duke game, and it's Luke Altmaier and it's Darian Mensah. And I had heard someone talking about Darian Mensah as a guy that, keep an eye on him, right? Like, he's a guy, he's good, he's talented. I got to tell you, I watched him in that game, and he made some mistakes. Duke kind of shot themselves in the foot a number of times in that game. I liked what I saw at him. I liked what I saw at Altmaier too. But I think Mensah is a guy with the way he navigates the pocket and the way he plays. I could see us talking in February, March, April about, there's some teams out there that really like Darian Mensah. I don't know if that means day 2 pick. I don't know what that means as far as where he might end up. But Tim, I just like the way he plays. I think there's something there that, again, you're in the ACC. I know it's Duke, so you aren't, you're going to be up against it sometimes, but there's going to be some opportunities for him to kind of show some things. I liked what I saw.
Yeah, that's a game I obviously didn't get a chance to see much, but, talking, about Duke, I think there was kind of the same thing, we talked about with, you could talk about a couple of years ago with Riley Leonard before he transferred to Notre Dame. Now, Duke's become a pretty solid program. They're not ever going to be, a powerhouse in the ACC or anything like that, but I think to a degree, it's kind of the Lenore Sellers effect where you kind of have to overcome a talent deficiency in order to really show what you're capable of. And, looking at his numbers, I mean, this is a guy who's already thrown for 700 plus yards, giving 73.5% of his passes. And, one of those games, was against Elon University. Certainly not, obviously, there's an FCS program, and Illinois, a team that I think a lot of people think is going to sneak in, really be in that playoff picture. By the way, a couple weeks from now, Illinois and Indiana, that's going to be must watch. Yeah. Who would have thought we'd be saying that about college football? Luke Altmaier one side, my other guy, Fernando Mendoza on the other. Let's go with that. That should be sneaky fun. But, getting back to the Darian Mensah thing, maybe it's a thing where, you get a guy who flashes now at a program like Duke. They go maybe win 7-8 games, go to a bowl game, late December. Then it's hard to talk about this sort of thing. It kind of feels very cold-blooded in a way, but it's just the nature of college football. Maybe he becomes a guy that, these top programs are going to be competing over in the transfer portal, trying to get him to their big program. If Clemson, if Kay Cabot goes pro, maybe they decide Darian Mensah is the next guy that they have to get in to compete for a national championship or something like that. Maybe he's a guy that, his next step is, obviously playing well this year at Duke, trying to overcome, maybe a supporting cast that's obviously not as good as what's around him. Maybe the step is perform well, like the Fernando Mendoza playing. He played great at Cal with what limited talent he have. Now he's in Indiana, still adjusting, but I think it's very early for him. So maybe it's a track where he plays well and then he goes to a bigger program in 2026. And we're starting to talk about him in what I think is still a very loaded class when you talk about Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway, and Arch Manning.
Yeah, again, Mensa's kind of on that list. Like, I don't know if he's going to be in this draft. I don't know if he's going to be in next year's draft. He redshirted in 23. So this is really only his second year starting. So maybe he goes back for another year. Maybe Lenora Sellers goes back for another year, right? It's so much easier for these guys to do that now. But Lance, I texted you, like, it was a sneaky good quarterback game. Now, Illinois kind of blew it open late. And again, Duke didn't help themselves, but it was fun watching those two guys go back and forth.
Well, like you said, Illinois and Duke, right? Two really good football teams. Two really well-coached football team. Illinois up front is really nasty up front offensively. They do. They get big double teams, and their quarterback play well. And they're obviously they're NFL based underneath center. But I like Mensa, and you know what? The thing we talk about all these guys, and I refer to my dad a lot because some of his stuff sticks with me now. But my dad always said we gotta, every time we come into a meeting, and it's kind of like analyzing these guys, right? Don't worry about what they do bad. Is what they do well good enough for us? And if what they do well, let's focus on what they do well, and then work on things they don't do well instead of going, you know what? He can't make this throw, or he can't do these things. Mensa made all the throws. He threw intermediate, he threw short, he threw bubble screens, he threw curls, he's thrown all the routes. So he can make all the throws, and obviously his supporting cast and everything that we talk about as we break these guys down. But there's a lot to like about him. He's physically gifted. He makes a lot of really good throws. I think, Duke is better than people give them credit for. But that's kind of how I'm going in it with. It's kind of like my, Dylan Gabriel kind of thing. Like, I understand he's short, I understand, all these things, but let's focus on what these guys do well. And if it's good enough, great. If not, then, obviously we'll take it. And I like how you threw Mendoza in there. That's your guy. Well done by you. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll probably be a guy that we talk about here at some point as well. I mean, there's a number of guys that I think fall in this category of, again, if they go in the draft, they're going to rise up some boards. People are going to fall in love with them. Now, some of us who were riding along in the Sam Levitt mobile, we're on the side of the road. We're calling the insurance company. We're trying to see if we can get this thing back on the road and going the right way again, because it was not great on Saturday. But
yeah, you're leaking oil, my friend. You're leaking oil on that one.
That was one of the games I did catch the end of. I was kind of in a back and forth with a handful of games, Michigan, Oklahoma, Boston College, Michigan State, which I do want to shout out Dylan Lonergan and Aiden Childs. They had a great game. That was a legitimately fun double overtime game. Both quarterbacks, 4 touchdowns. We talked about Aiden Childs a little bit. And, he's got some sneaky ups. He's an upside guy. I shouldn't say sneaky upside. You can see the upside. You just want to kind of see him develop a little bit, but yeah, I'm looking at, the box score from Mississippi State, Arizona State. I kind of flipped to that late, and then you see that 58-yard touchdown pass, Blake Shapen to Brendan Thompson. Yeah, that was sneaky. And Sam Levitt throwing for 82 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. You could see where the loss of a Cam Scatterbo kind of can affect a guy a little bit. And when you lose those impact players, certainly it takes a little time to adjust and figure out, how you're going to play. You can go in, want to play a certain way, but then when, you kind of hit a wall or whatever, you got to pivot, you got to adjust. That's why there's 12 games in a college football season. You have all this time to go back, make adjustments over the course of a season and see where you can go from there. I mean, there's in this college football playoff era, what we've learned is losses do not hurt, do not kill you. They're just setbacks to get you ready for down the road.
Tim, your guy Scatterbo, he was looking for contact on Sunday in that game.
Oh yeah, I had to tweet that. I tweeted, Cam Scatterbo in the pros looks a lot like Cam Scatterbo in college. I think he leveled one of the Washington players in that game. So
he had on back-to-back plays, he had a blitz pickup, just absolutely destroyed this guy who was coming in. I think it was a linebacker. And then on the next play, he got a carry, and it took like 3 guys to bring him down, and he just absolutely leveled a couple of Washington guys. It was about the only thing that happened good for the Giants, but your guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're high on him. Yeah. Every time he does something, I think of you for sure.
Well, I try my best here.
All right. We are going to wrap this segment up here. We're going to do a few more of these as the season goes along. We'll talk more quarterbacks. Maybe we'll get into some other positions as well, because the Browns do have those 2 first-round picks. And there's going to be some intriguing guys in the first round. They have a lot of draft picks just in general, so there's going to be a lot of intriguing guys to talk about. So all the things we got to promote here. If you're not a subscriber on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, get subscribed. If you're listening and not watching this on YouTube, head to Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com and get subscribed to the YouTube channel. We do live post-game pods. Most of these pods go up on YouTube as videos, so go to Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Hit that subscribe button there. Our Instagram is Orange and Brown Talk. Our Twitter is Orange and Brown Talk. And I told you in my intro about Football Insider, I'll say it one more time. Get subscribed, Football Insider, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. Get that newsletter, get texts, get access to those subscriber stories at cleveland.com/Browns. So get involved with that. Tim and Lance, I appreciate you guys taking the time. For Mary Kay and Ashley earlier, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.